Hey, it's Eli Johnson with nerdsofcolor.org. Thank you guys so much for having me.
Thank you for having us.
So the film hints at a lot of possibilities and motivations for the main character, Renata, and it isn't that the narrator himself is unreliable, it's that he's making discoveries along with the audience. And I thought that was very fascinating. How important was it for you to kind of subvert the genre story-wise, and what were some of the elements that you were eager to try out on the screen for a suspense film like this? Jordan.
I'm gonna have to let Lay take this one away as the director of the film. I feel like he's got to give that answer first.
Okay, for sure, absolutely.
Definitely. When we kind of first outlined the story, our entire goal was like, look, we need to subvert expectations. We need to, kind of like, uh, you know, play off of like some of the typical tropes that you might see in a thriller slash horror type of film. And, really just sort of reinforce that idea of like, look, you never really know, what's coming next. You never really know what's around every corner. Our protagonist, she, is someone that I don't even know if I would necessarily classify her as like unreliable. It's almost like I think the film overall is kind of unreliable, if that, makes sense. It's almost like we don't know if the perspective outside of her own is accurate, if hers is accurate. It's, I don't even know if it's necessarily just all on her. I think the whole film is kind of one where it's like we're just in this world of, any possibility.
Absolutely. And you guys have some really beautiful on location shots. There's some really gorgeous outdoor scenes, some really gorgeous scenery and set design and things like that. What was it kind of the process of scouting those out and kind of making those a possibility? Could you walk us through that?
Yeah, I mean, we got very fortunate. The location that we were at, it was this property in Woodland Hills that has two homes on the property. So we used one for base camp and one for our picture house. And from the beginning, our purpose was to try to find something that was very contained from a story standpoint and also a location. But having that big backyard that felt very enclosed by all the trees definitely helped raise the production value and keep us contained.
Absolutely. And Sule, this is very much a question for both of you, kind of as creatives. And I love your sorry, I'm a creative wardrobe. It's perfect,
Oh
I
yeah,
think, for
thanks
the
a lot.
day.
It's the clothing brand, man. For the crew clothing, of
I
course.
love that. I love that. But kind of touching on that, I want to give you both the guys the chance to answer this. But I want to start with you, Soleil. As we celebrate the legacy of Oscar Micheaux and the spirit of breaking boundaries, you guys took the reins to have creative control and flesh out the short independently. And the results are very high end. It's like a very big budget film that, at least in the appearance and the construction of it. So could you walk us through the process of building a team who are able to carry out your vision, Soleil?
Yeah. Well, I'll say when it comes to the team regarding like crew and everything, like from all of our day-to-day crew guys, Brick, Gaffer, all of that, that really came through Jordan and his a lot of his relationships, having been in LA, running a production company, mixed media, so just, being able to make that call and say, hey, you know, we don't have a lot, we ain't got much, but what we're creating is something special that just comes from, maintaining integrity and just, having that respect from people that, are really doing some good work in the field. As far as like, talent and, you know, things of like that nature, I would say, Patrick, Andrea, those two in my mind were kind of like match made in heaven. They already knew each other, so that chemistry was kind of there. But once they got their hands on that script, and I want to say it was like first draft. Once they got their hands on that script, they were sold.
I want to say 6 months before we made Peripheral. We met each other and we just said, why are we waiting around? Let's go and make something. So fortunately, I own film equipment, cinema cameras, lighting equipment, box trucks, etc. So we just got together and said, let's make something. We made a 3-minute, proof of concept for a TV show, and we were both blown away with how cool it was and how cinematic it turned out. And we said, all right, well, this is so cool. Why don't we do this again, but for a whole 90 minutes? So gathered a bunch of troops and said, guys, let's make a movie. Let's just make it happen. Let's not talk about it. Let's make it. And, here we are a little over a year later with a finished film that's won Best Picture at ABFF, nominated for 3 awards at Micheaux. And, just gonna keep on getting this thing out to the world and showing people that if you put your mind to something and you believe in it and you wrangle your troops, anything's possible.
Absolutely. And it's a very immaculately produced film. And as we know, there's a massive shortage of black-led films that kind of tap into these horror, sci-fi, and thriller genres. And
Right.
even fewer that combine all three of those. So, Sule, what was the inception of Peripheral? What inspired the story, and how did you know this could work?
Man, I mean, I'm just a huge sci-fi fan in general. I grew up watching The X-Files, Twilight Zone on repeat, so I was always just kind of like enamored with the idea of, kind of being able to create the worlds that you want, or just, bending reality, bending physics to kind of like your own will, and I felt like a lot of genres, they'll kind of have that limitation of like, historical accuracy, or drama, black people falling over, in the hood somewhere. So I just was kind of like, man, I want to see us do something different. I want to see us, go to space, and we should have our own annihilations. And and honestly, I want to say Jordan Peele was definitely, a huge motivating factor, because I went to see Get Out in the theater when it came out, and just seeing people's reaction. It was sort of like the zeitgeist of the moment, of like, this is a moment that he kind of created, and it was the timing was perfect. Like it was needed. What Donald Glover is doing with Atlanta, um, even Issa Rae, she kind of has like some Afro surrealism going on with Insecure. So I'm like, I think the timing is right for, us to be doing some different weird little things. So that was I would say, yeah, the contemporaries within the industry, I think, definitely motivated it, and just my upbringing.
Absolutely. And I want to get another question I want to get both of you guys' opinions on, because I always like to go straight to the source when I ask this, is what would you guys kind of like to viewers to take away from the film, whether it's a certain feeling, or it's like an inspiration, or it's, a message or anything like that. What would you guys kind of like for viewers to walk away from? I want to kind of give it to Soleil and then to Jordan as well.
Um, I would say, honestly, I want people actually. You mind if Jordan answers first?
No, absolutely. Whoever's comfortable.
Yeah, so my answer to that question is more about the process of creating it, and it does piggyback off of what I already said. The budget on this movie is less than most people spend on short films. And when I first got into this industry, it was as an actor, and my understanding of making awesome stuff was from an actor's perspective. It was, all right, you need to shut down roads, you need an 80-person, crew, you need permits and all this stuff in order to make something cool. When I realized that that is a load of shit, excuse my French, you can get people together, you can rent a camera for $200 on ShareGrid, and if you get creative and you have the willpower to do it, you can make something. You don't have to wait. And that's what this movie is. This movie is just a bunch of people who are passionate and excited about storytelling and filmmaking coming together and making something we're proud of. So that's the biggest takeaway I want other people to feel, whether they're an actor or a filmmaker or just anything in life. So
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely second, all of that, and I would even kind of like specify it to, our community, I guess a little more specifically, which is like, we're not confined to reality, or what we perceive even to be, reality. I think that there are, so many stories that can be told. Like, I'm a huge H.P. Lovecraft fan. And, yeah, he might have been a racist, weirdo or whatever. But I think
It
that
was a product of the times,
it was, yeah, that's even debatable. But, he was who he was. But what he created in cosmic horror, or kind of like being the godfather of cosmic horror, is that idea that, look, we can tap on those sort of primal fears, and those sort of innate kind of like anxieties that we have, but then you can intertwine that with a bigger picture, a bigger, grander sort of like what is out there in the universe, what, and sort of juxtapose that, or even counter that to what we have going on internally. And I think that's what Peripheral, at least I would hope that's what Peripheral conveys, is like, there's a whole big world out there. There's, a whole bunch of scary things out there, but the things that we deal with internally are, even much more of the challenge that we face. So, and there's ways to overcome that. So I hope that's what is conveyed when people watch it.
Absolutely. And this, again, monumentally produced, monumentally shot. It's just a gorgeous film
Thank
with
you.
a great story, great actors, and the atmosphere you guys construct is so immersive and so surreal and spooky. And I think you guys just did a great job with everything from top to bottom. So congratulations on the nomination at the Micheaux,
Thank you.
and thank you guys for crafting such a great film, and congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, thank you
Thank
guys.
you, Eli.
So first of all, I kind of want to get into the backbone of the story. So Phoenix is an emotional story told from essentially two perspectives of the same character, which is a very unique way to drive the narrative. How early on in the script was the decision made to have the main character have this sort of split personality, and how did that influence the tone of the script as it developed genre-wise? Was it always supposed to be in this style, or did it kind of evolve as you fleshed out the script?
Yeah, great question. It's kind of more than a split personality. It's almost like a past lives type of thing. So that was definitely part of the original script. Kind of telling it through a therapist perspective and trying to find like a grounded way of trying to introduce something that is a little otherworldly, and like magical realism for the lack of a better term. And so yeah, that was definitely from the beginning, and that's kind of where the title of the film comes from, Phoenix. It's kind of talking about the mythical bird and reincarnation. They're kind of immortal and they just keep taking birth again, so that's kind of the metaphor in the title.
Absolutely. And one of the cornerstones of the plot is the classism and the racism of the day and age of the 1800s, and before that, around the Victorian era. Why was that important to touch on, and how did you decide to approach it without being too overhanded, but still direct and still approach it in a way that was relevant to the story and also kind of shared your thoughts and commented on the topic?
Yeah, definitely. So great that you noticed that was subtly in there, because I didn't know how subtle it was. But that was very much kind of from the beginning, because I'm Indian. I grew up mainly in the States, but most of my family is in India, and a lot of Americans don't know that the British ruled India for over 300 years, and so that's something that a lot of my friends and people here had no idea about. So I thought that, if I'm going to go into the past, I could go anywhere. Why not show this part of the story? Kind of like how I think African Americans have such a massive impact on American culture. I think it's very similar with Indians having such an impact on British culture. Like their number one dish is the chicken tikka, like their national dish in England is that, and tea and spices and things like that. So I really wanted to kind of put that in there as something that people haven't seen before.
Absolutely. And as we celebrate the legacy of Oscar Micheaux and the spirit of breaking boundaries, you took the reins in to have creative control and to flesh out the short independently of major studios. And the results are incredibly high end for, the production value as far as the graphics, the color grading, the audio quality, everything like that. Could you walk us through the process of building the team who would be able to carry out your vision? What was the process in kind of getting the crew together who you could trust to put this vision in their hands?
Yeah, so I think that my producing partner and I, we went to film school. We've been making a lot of shorts that are, um, practice rounds, I guess, for the lack of a better word. Excuse me. And so we knew that, we're putting our own money, our own time, our own energy in like a year and a half of our lives. And it's actually a proof of concept. So, I'm sure you can get from the film. It kind of ends with like, oh my God, what's going to happen next? And so uh, we actually, a lot of the heads of department were us. Like I edited the film, we did the production design, just because it was sometimes like we knew what we wanted. I think me as a director, I'm also a writer, I'm also an actor and a producer. So I kind of can switch hats and I know exactly how to do everyone's job. So it was really great to collaborate with, the composer, because I think I really had a good sense of what I wanted, and we hired people from our alma mater who had a couple of years of experience, and who we had so many meetings with. We went through 3 or 4 DPs before we locked one in. We went through a couple of composers. So it was really just talking about it and seeing who understood it, because it's a very specific tone that a lot of shorts might not be able to do. So yeah.
Absolutely. And I like what you touched on. You mentioned the set design, because I wanted to talk about it. You have some really stunning locations in here that, you know, they feel kind of timeless. They feel like they work in different ages. Can you talk about where was the film shot? How did you guys scout for the locations, and like where did you kind of settle on to build the story around?
Yeah, absolutely. So we were debating about shooting it in LA. I'm originally from Dallas, and so we ended up shooting it in Dallas. We flew out some of the actors there. Our 2 lead actresses are from LA, but our lead, the one who plays the therapist, is from Dallas. And in Dallas, we just know that our money can go a little further. And actually, every location we got in this film was free. So we were able to use our extra money to really spruce up every location. So the therapist's office and Florence's bedroom is actually my parents' house. My poor parents, I kind of kicked them out, and I like destroyed their house and built sets in it and everything like that. Because uh, even though it was only like a 18-minute short film, we shot for a long time, and I'm someone who, like, I'm very meticulous directing wise. We're taking as much time as needed to get the acting right, because if the acting isn't right, none of it's believable, unfortunately. And so this big concept will just it'll fall flat. And so the reason we did that is because we essentially shot in my childhood home, and all the actors and the crew slept upstairs, and we would walk downstairs into the set. So like there was like no wasting time and no wasting of any kind of resources at our disposal.
For sure. And you touched on the acting, and I want to expand on that. Is you know, you have a really powerful lead actress in this film, and because she has to be able to, she cycles through so many different stages of emotion, and that she has just an incredible range. I know you mentioned working with some of your alma mater. Was she a part of that, or how did you kind of go about the casting process of finding, you know, your lead therapist and finding the leading lady?
Yeah, yes, we are so very lucky to have both of them. And Rachel Coops, we auditioned. I think over originally the original casting call submits were like over like 1,300 or 1,500, and then 300 women read for the part. So we went through 300 auditions. So we were kind of just anywhere in any place that is somebody was willing to read it, we were letting them. And so it took a lot of actors before we could find Rachel, and she I mean, you saw her perform. Like she got it from the get-go, which to be able to do something like that in an audition is like very difficult. And we really had a shorthand. She understood exactly the tone and the specificity that I was going for. I gave her a couple of films to watch. And I guess me being an actor, I'm so particular with the acting, and and we're really literally living through her eyes a lot of the time in the film. So they needed to be expressive, but not too much. And I don't know, it's a very fine line of like every little beat of the film has to be perfectly in sync, and she's a champ. She was willing to do it again and again and again and again.
Absolutely. And I'm curious about how much study went into the approach with, you know, our therapist character, because, you know, there's a lot of, the theme is hypnosis, right? So he kind of like tries to get into her head and kind of unravel it that way. I'm kind of curious about what's the level of research that you went into to kind of develop it, like why that approach to that a character, while, you know, there's so many other forms of therapy that you could probably get into. So how did you kind of hone in on wanting hypnosis to be the driving force behind that?
Yeah, great question. So I actually wanted to talk. I wanted to make a film about past lives and how, we reincarnate. And there's like, I think in my culture, in Hindu culture and in Buddhist culture, past lives reincarnation is something that's very, very like common and openly talked about, but it's nothing. No, we haven't really seen it in Western entertainment. So I wanted to do that, but I wanted to do it in a grounded way. And actually, this form of hypnosis that he accidentally discovers is called past life regression. And you can actually do it. So my uncles, my aunts, the composer on this film had done it before doing this film. And they saw different, whether you choose to believe it or not, I don't know, to each their own, but I thought it was really interesting that, oh, it's done through hypnosis, which is something that a lot of people use to overcome traumas or addictions. If somebody wants to get rid of smoking cigarettes through hypnosis, they can pretty much subconsciously stop after 1 or 2 sessions, you know? So I kind of wanted to explore, what if that went a little haywire and the real cause of our trauma isn't from something in this life and it's from something that we don't know.
That's brilliant. And I've not heard that approach to, to trauma approach that way as well, which leads me to my next question, which is a bit of a two-parter. The first part is, why do you think this story is relevant for this day and age? Like, why was this something that you felt like you absolutely had to tell and kind of had to flesh out in this way?
Yeah, so I think given the state of the world and especially America, I think everything is so divided. It's so black and white. It's so I'm this, you're that, and and all that stuff. And I kind of wanted to. It starts off as a thriller, and it starts off as a mystery, and at least for the way that this ends is still kind of a mystery. But sooner or later, at the end of the film, she finds out that, oh, her coworker was the Indian boy in like reincarnated. So we're seeing that, whether we're enemies or friends or whatever, that we're all in this together, for not to sound so cheesy and sappy, but and I think that, if somebody can walk out of the film, or maybe down the road the feature film, and think about like, oh, maybe my daughter, who I don't have any relationship with, maybe we have some past that we don't know about, maybe my enemy in this life was my lover in the last life, or whatever. I just think that to show that we are all connected, and to show that we give and we take. So just keep that in mind, and maybe your relationships are not as they seem.
Absolutely. That actually kind of answered my second part of my question, which was also going to be, what would you want the viewers to take away? Kind of summarized up, like, what would you want people to leave the thing feeling? So if you could maybe expound on that just a touch more as well.
Sure. Yeah. Well, for the most part, anytime we've shown, obviously we haven't premiered the film, but to get feedback on cuts and things like that, like whenever we show it to them, people read the script and they didn't. So the script and the film obviously are very, very different, because when people see it, it's like, oh, this is what you were trying to do. On the script, it's hard to imagine something like this. And I think everyone, for the most part, I'm hoping that what they take away from it is that, just I think, me as a filmmaker, especially, my job isn't to like say this definitively or that definitively. I think if I can plant a seed in your head, that's all I want to do. If you want to grow that seed, that's up to you. But at least the seed is, planted, of like, oh, is this a possibility? Or, oh, have I not thought this through? Maybe, so for example, my uncle, he actually did past life regression. This is where I got that idea from. And he was going through similar things that the character was going through, except he felt like he was always drowning, and he felt like he was always, pretty much when he was 40, he started feeling like he was drowning every time he slept. He couldn't figure it out. He thought he had asthma. He went through so many doctors over a couple of years, and finally he went to a past life regressionist. And in the hypnosis, he saw himself as a child, maybe, I don't know, 100 years ago, and the child, drowned in a lake. And so because he drowned in his past life, he was feeling like he couldn't breathe anytime he laid down. Anytime he got near water, he would get scared. He was scared to swim. And after that past life regression, all of his problems went away. And so I think that if some people who are going through things and they don't understand why things can't be fixed, maybe this is something that they could try in the future if they believe in it. Even if they don't, like, who knows? There's lots of stories about past life regression, even in the States.
Absolutely. Well, Phoenix is a brilliant film, brilliantly executed, and I think the cast, the crew, everyone did a fantastic job. And congratulations on the nomination at the Micheaux. And thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it, and it was a stunning film.
Thank you so much, Eli. Great questions. Thank you for watching and really, really taking it in. It's really, really great to hear that people are receiving it the way that we intended.
Absolutely. And you like you infuse so much of culture and history into it. So I think the way we can also educate people is by through media this way, right? So if there's something that you want people to know, whether it's the Indian and British connection, I think the way that you do it by placing it within these kinds of things, sometimes things are more interesting or more believable when they're kind of dressed up in that fantastical aspect, right? So I think this is just a genius approach to doing it, and the execution was incredibly well done. So thank you guys so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I kind of wanted to talk about aesthetically, musically, and editorially. There's a lot of callbacks to kind of classic pulp cinema and like westerns, and there's a lot of themes that you have in there that are merged with the unique and international premise of the film, using Darfur and Israel. I'm kind of curious to know what were some of your stylistic influences going into this movie.
So I think first and foremost, first of all, thank you for that, and thank you for those comments. That's really insightful. I would say first and foremost, when you have a lead actress that just like spot on looks, acts, and feels like Pam Grier, you're gonna want to call back some of those blaxploitation films like Foxy Brown, that kind of thing. And those films are super over the top. But they're also crazy stylized, and they're also made at a time where like that's what you could make. And I've read a lot actually about what Pam Grier talked about and what those characters represented. And in terms of Israeli cinema, that was completely lacking. And so for me, the genre sort of fit the kind of characters I built this around the actors. So for me, the genre ended up suiting the actors. And yeah, I mean, I was as much as like the obvious like modern like millennial callback would be someone like a Tarantino. I think actually Burn After Reading by the Coen brothers was another big one, just in terms of the incompetence, and trying to stylistically nail that down. And then just Robert Altman and Paul Thomas Anderson in general, in terms of music cues and sort of tracking shots and long takes.
Absolutely. And a lot of that really does come through. And I'm glad that you mentioned the casting because this film has such a really, really talented and very unique cast. I kind of want to walk through the process of what casting that was like because for a character like, with Musa, he has to be able to speak, Hebrew, he has to be able to speak English and all these things. Were you able to, because you said you conceived it with the characters and the actors in mind. Did you kind of have these people in mind first, or what was the process of finding people who were diverse enough and had the skill sets to
So
do that?
I met them on a film, like I met them, this is a second year film school project. I literally dropped out of film school to finish making this. And like it was a film school project that just kind of kept getting a little bigger and better than what it was. And the school didn't, I don't want to say anything bad about the school because they'll probably post this later. So they were very supportive. And so I would say, like, I was on a different project, and the same two actors were cast in I was the assistant director, and they were the lead and the two co-leads, but they were playing brother and sister. And he's Sudanese, and she's Ethiopian Jewish. They don't look at all alike. I mean, as much as like a Japanese person and a German might, you know. So, like, just because they're both black and African, that said, I was also part of the decision to cast them because she was such a good actress. But knowing they played brother and sister, it just felt a little off and a little, and so I actually had conceived of this idea of where their difference in appearance and someone making that mistake could be sort of written into a plot. But 100% this was written for those actors that I'd already met. There's no way you could write Musa and expect that a person like Hamis El Sheikh exists that could play him. The idea is like he actually moved to Israel the same time I did, except like I, did it in a very easy formal process, whereas he crossed the border from Egypt, like through Sudan into Egypt and into Israel. It's a long story, and his Hebrew's better than mine. Like, and he actually does speak like 9 languages. And his mother tongue is almost something he's long forgotten because he doesn't have use for it. But I was just so impressed with the two of them on the other film that, and it was just a film school project. It wasn't something that was going to be released, that I wanted to write something specifically for them. And Hamis gets typecast as a refugee typically because there's very few Hebrew-speaking Sudanese characters that most people can conceive of. And I think also just being American-born and living in Israel, I had a little bit broader of an idea. I had my own sort of cliche I could put him into, the warlord. I mean, I'm not like reinventing the wheel here. But he wanted to play a bad guy, and he wanted to explore that range. And you know, we actually wrote it about some people he had known about, and we used their names. So there's actually a real Musa Issa Musa somewhere who is not a good guy.
Wow, amazing, amazing. And as we celebrate, the legacy of Oscar Micheaux and the spirit of breaking boundaries, you took the reins to have creative control and you fleshed out the short independently. And the results are like incredibly high end. The shooting, the visuals, the color grading, everything is really top notch. So could you walk us through the process of building a team who could carry out your vision?
Absolutely. First of all, Roz Birger, my DP, who did he pulled his own focus. We shot that on a DSLR. Um, I mean, we kind of picked time over money and quality of gear and stuff, and you know, he knew it was his own camera, so he knew it really well. And he's actually shot my the next movie I made, which was an American film called 1805, which was in Micheaux last year. And we just finished well, not finished, we're still shooting a documentary that we shot in Israel in March. So each time we've gotten a slightly better camera, but I've always kind of hobbled him with that. But he's just a technical mastermind, and he did his own color grade for that as well. You know, a lot of we storyboarded the entire thing. We had so much movement and so many times we were breaking the 180 and stuff, that we really wanted to be certain that like it would look good. So we actually animated some of it ahead of time. We had a floor plan that was like accurate to the millimeter. So like we were super planned. We didn't have good gear necessarily. We didn't have bad gear, but we also, it was in film school. You know, we were able to build our own sets. We had a lot of control and a lot of time, and we had a big crew that we didn't have to pay. So like I took advantage of all those things, and I'm sure you've heard the filmmakers triangle. What's it like? Good, fast, cheap. I mean, we tried to do good and cheap, but it took 4 years.
Look, all good things take time, so I think the result speaks for itself here. And
Thank you so much.
you had a really fantastic score, and I know you mentioned that a little bit earlier. So could you kind of walk us through the process? Did you kind of have, a template or an idea of how you wanted the score to be, or was that something that you really left in the hands of the composer?
So, God, I hope I'm getting the name of the band right. I want to say it's The Ventures. It was like the 60s like surf rock music band, and they had an album called The Ventures in Space. I'm not sure if that's the name of the album or just like the colloquialism of how people call it, but it was like this really psychedelic surf rock album from the 60s. And I had met the composer Adam Rose originally to try and get the rights for it, which there was just no way. I mean, there's just no way. And but he's a composer, and he offered his ability to do it, and he's a sax player and I'm also I don't know how much you can see some of the music you hear, but I'm also a musician, so I'm a good enough musician to know that I'm not a good enough musician to do this, but I'm good enough to pick out a good musician. And so we actually were able to like talk in terms of music theory and using different modes and stuff like that to change the mood, and putting certain instrumental textures that were like laying underneath in sort of a bed that we would bring to the forefront. And we actually like we had different motifs for each of the characters. So we did what we like to call like you have like a leitmotif in terms of color, and we did that with music essentially.
I love that. And in conclusion, I always kind of like to ask it straight from the source. What would you like viewers to take away from the film? What would you like people to go out feeling or thinking? Because there's so many different layers and so many different undertones of the story and so many different subtext. What would you like people to kind of come out feeling?
I would love to invest in this project. No, like I would
That's a
say
great answer too, though.
seriously, that is probably it. I would say honestly, more than anything, even if the project or me or whatever, you know, I can be kind of intense, and I'm a thing, you know, like notice some of the talent involved, you know, whether it's Khamis, he's a Sudanese refugee, he's stateless. Yasser Abdallah is another one of the Sudanese actors, also from Darfur, who, you know, his one of the directors that directed him in his in a starring role was killed a year ago, on October 7th, and Yahav Winner. So like, who also went to the same film school we did, and was a fan of this movie actually. So it's like I just take some of the talent, you know. I'll be fine. I'll figure it out. But like Hamis, you know, if anyone who's seeing this that has some pool, like you're gonna like you'll get so much benefit from putting some of these people in your movie. Bring them to America, bring them to Europe, wherever you can. Get them in international productions and take advantage of it. And Rosberger, the DP, I mean, I cannot recommend him enough to anyone. He's as good as there is, absolutely as good as there is.
I love that. And Down the River, once again, is a fantastic film. Thank you so much for your time, Daniel.
Eli, thank you so much. This was an incredible experience. You're incredible at this and really well prepared, and this was really an honor.
No, it's my pleasure because it's not too often that you see independent films where it really is the quality is so there, and that's what really was so evident in your film and for the actors. And like I said, the fact that it was such an international endeavor is something that makes it really special and really stand out to me. I'm actually Ghanaian on my mother's side, so like kind of like that connection with Africa and
Mhm.
everything also made it kind of like closer to me in a lot of ways.
Yeah, even like we had another actor that was he's Ni like half Nigerian, half Sudanese,
Mm.
and like even getting the permission for the kids that appear in the movie in the beginning. There were one of the kids like in the playground where I'd meet them, where there's like a playground with like all the African refugees play. One of the kids was Filipino, and all this like we're like we didn't want to not include him in the movie. Now we ended up signing 12 kids and maybe three showed up and one just for the pizza. But like we had this whole idea we're just gonna put him in there and just not explain, and like that was kind of the vibe we went with. And the you know it was a lot of listening, a lot of being sensitive to the people making it, but we were really trying to take the piss out of the people that ruined their country. So and somewhat other ones and our own introspective way of our own. So
Absolutely.
um,
Well, congratulations and thank you so much on the
thank you
film.
so much. Look
It's
forward
an
to.
amazing film.
Thank you so much.
Well, I'm glad to be here.
So first of all, we gotta kind of start with the inception of everything. You know, The Distinguished is such a beautiful adaptation of your own book to screen, and you merged Black culture with fantasy, religion in a way we don't usually get on screen. So
Mhm.
going back to the inception, why was it important to tell this story in this day and age?
Well, it's kind of funny, in a good way where, like in Hollywood, there's this thing where they say, tell your truth, tell your story. And ultimately, I've been telling my truth and telling my story for a long time. However, it was just missing that magical component, which is something that's always like lived in me since I was a kid. And of course, I used to get in trouble all the time for making magic potions. So it was like one of those things where it was like, oh, finally now maybe this is the right time for me to really kind of like explore what that looks like too. But also at the same time, I'm from Texas. I'm from the South. I grew up in the church. And so those components were very important to me too, at the same time, in terms of how do I bring certain elements into it, especially I'm when people have the opportunity to see the project, there's a number that sticks out, 338. And that number represents basically prepare and get ready for war. And that's in Ezekiel, where we kind of talk about that in the Bible a little bit. And so I was like, oh, this is really fascinating. But the numbers in itself, numerically, when you add them up, it gives context to the birth of seven and how long his father had been away. And so with those moments coming together, it really explains like what's about to unfold, on a much bigger level. But yeah, it was important to tell the story like this because ultimately, just cut and dry, yeah, we have, the films that showcase us in, magical ways where we're fighting and doing fun things, but those things are not necessarily created by us in terms of like owned and all of that. So I thought it was very timely where I could express myself the way that I felt, and what makes me excited and hopefully make other people excited too.
I love that. And that actually leads perfectly into the next question because as we celebrate the legacy of Oscar Micheaux and the spirit of breaking boundaries, you know, you took the reins to have creative control and to flesh out the short independently. And the results are incredibly high end. I remember the film starts, we have all these different special effects going. And I was like, I did not know what I didn't know I was getting into, but it was so good and it was so well done. So could you walk us through the process of building a team who could carry out your vision independently?
Well, you want to know something? This is, you know, I've learned, I've been in LA now for 16 years. So I started out as an actor and done some really fun shows. But on the backside, you kind of watch in production where if you've been on like a movie set with the same person that's created it, let's just give like an Adam Sandler, you know, for instance, or like an Antoine Fuqua, for instance, too, at the same time, you typically see the same people in terms of team, right? And so I already have a lot of friends and I have a lot of friends that are in the business. And it was one of those things that, you know, again, we all have different things that we're doing within the business, but we all have the same goal in terms of like making something dynamic and, you know, doing something that is big and how can we like mesh our brains together. So ultimately it was as simple as me, you know, I'm saying simple, but as me talking to a few of my friends that I was like, hey, so I have this idea and I want to do it. Do you want to go on this journey with me kind of situation? And so they're like, well, what's the idea? And you kind of give it to them. They're like, wait a minute, this is like kind of crazy. Um, how are we gonna pay for this? You know? But saying all that to say, yeah, I really leaned on my friends that shared the same like-mindedness in terms of wanting to do dope things in this business and really turn things on its dial a little bit, especially when it comes to Black storytelling. And yeah, and my whole thing too is like I am a perfectionist. It gets a little scary at times, just in a sense of like it has to be done the way that I want it. And I know like that's give and take in the business, but overall, it's like when you really have a vision and you really want to execute it, you figure out every avenue that you possibly can. And that's exactly what, you know, we did with this. And especially, you know, with the vision, it was like, I didn't want to compromise if I didn't have to. So let's turn every stone. And then if every stone has been turned and we can't make it, then you know we do what we got to do. We got to switch gears. But yeah, I'm a perfectionist, and so the people around me, just as much as my mind is going, their minds are going to, and so that's how we created something super dynamic.
I love that. And we're going to kind of circle back to that in a few, but I did kind of want to ask because some of the locations are really stunning in this film. So I kind of wanted to know what the process of kind of like acquiring those sets and kind of like scouting those locations was, because we have, you know, a beautiful college university area. We have like all these different sequences in the forest and things like that. So what was
Yeah.
kind of the process of scouting these locations, getting the access to those?
So one, well, all of it's like really fun and exciting, but uh crazy story. So the scene where we see our lead Seven running down the steps, that's like an iconic moment for me because I'm sure maybe you're familiar with How to Get Away with Murder. And so Middleton University. And so we had the opportunity to shoot at that location, which was really fun. And when I saw it, I'm just gonna say I was gagged. I was like, I gotta have it. Like, I need this space because it just tied in the vision, but also at the same time, I was like, for the love of God, Viola Davis, like she walked these steps, you know. So I was
How
like, this
often do you
has
get
to
to
be
do that, right? You got to
right.
tease it. You
So
got
I
to
was like,
tease it.
we gotta take this. So that was one location, and securing that, you know, I have to give it to my team. Again, it was like, this is what I want. And so they made it happen. We made some phone calls, and we were able to pull that off. Also, the distinguish when we see the parlor scene, which is like that's the scene that actually went viral. And that's at first they said no. They're like, we can't have it. And it was just like, I have to have it. Like it was like, and we looked at other locations, but nothing, you know, like when you walk into something, you see that and you feel the energy of it and you like, this is exactly what you need. Again, so one of my producers went back to the school where we were at, and there was just like a hidden treasure that was just like ducked off. And they were like, okay, we'll give it to you guys under one condition. And so whatever those conditions were, they made it work. So we were able to get that. And then also just overall, like the forest and things, that's actually, which is kind of crazy. There's two parts to that. One part of it is we actually had to utilize green screen, which is really, really cool. But the opening sequence of the film actually is AI, which is very fascinating. And I was a little, because that was a big topic. It still is a topic.
Yeah.
But to actually incorporate it in the film and, work with the actor through that process, that was really fascinating because the only thing that we had to do with him, we had to scan him. And then from there, it was like, we want you to wear these clothes. And then from there, they scanned his whole body, like multiple different, ways, hands, like all that stuff. And then we injected him into a system, and then we can manipulate his body however we wanted to at that point, which was crazy. And it was mind blowing. And then, also, as I said, for me being an actor first, like the importance of knowing that this is a tool that we can utilize. I only see it as a tool. I never see it as a thing where we should be taking anything away from talent either at the same time. Like that, sure, we scanned you, but that's you, at the end of the day. So, but that's a whole other topic. But yeah, so super fascinating.
Absolutely. And I've kind of had the same mindset since the onset of the AI conversation kind of came about, where it's something to enhance the performance, not to, replace the performance, right?
Right.
And
right.
I love
Exactly.
that you guys were able to do that in a way that actually served the story as well. And so on the similar topic and in closing, like I always like to get to know from the source, what would you like people to take away from the film, from the story? What is the overall message that you want viewers to leave with?
Finding your voice and finding your magic. That is exactly the theme of it. That is the journey that Seven goes on. That is my journey. I feel as though a lot of the talent that's a part of the project, that has been their journey, and still we're all on that journey every day, and I don't think that's something that ever will be a thing of change, because as the world turns, there's an ebb and flow, and every day we're defining ourselves, right? So that's the message.
Absolutely. I love that. Well, thank you so much for your time, Rickey. And I'm sorry for the little technical difficulties at the beginning.
Oh, no, you're good.
You muscled through it, and I appreciate that so much. Thank you guys so much for your time, and congratulations on The Distinguished. It is an amazing film.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It was nice meeting you.
You too, Rickey. Thank you.
All right. Have a good one. Bye.
Comments in the lectures, fanboys, professional artists, and professors. Maybe a nerd who's just like you, talking about the things that you like too. So I invite you to the NOC. In full color, you see me. The Hard Knock Life, comics, movies, and TV. Yeah.